Yesterday, I mentioned the great civic pride of Worcester, Massachusetts, and that's the smiley face. And today I thought, I really ought to dedicate an episode to Worcester in England. Mm, It's only fair. So that's why today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet is all about the sauce. I'm John Paulus. Thanks for joining me today. The county that Worcester in England is in is Worcestershire. If you're from Worcester or Worcestershire, let me know how I'm doing with the pronunciation. But the point of this is it's spelled Worcester. And I won't get into details about that, but the Cester part clues you into the fact that there's a camp there. That's towns that end in that ending in the British Isles had camps, or a settlement in that way, a camp settlement. So that is that I'll just stop there because it's too we're not going down that rabbit hole. Now, Worcestershire is the county, of course, and in the early 19th century, John Wheely Lee and William Henry Perrins, two pharmacists in the city of Worcester, in Worcestershire, mixed up a sauce that they let ferment in, I think, the basement. And that sauce had anchovies in it, along with things like tamarind and acetic acid, spirit vinegar. And that acetic acid is the acid part of vinegar, but when it's when you encounter it in pharmacies in the early 19th century, there's the concentrated form basically of the vinegar that's derived from vinegar is acetic acid. So there's acetic acid and there's other things. The allowing allowing the fish to ferment, the anchovies to ferment, produce this very what we call now in English, using the Japanese word umami, a savory sauce that was a big hit. And you might have guessed from their last names, Lee and Perrins, that you've probably seen their product on a store shelf near you. It's the original Worcestershire sauce, or Worcester sauce, as some folks call it. I believe in the United Kingdom sometimes it's called Worcester sauce. If you call it Worcester sauce, let me know. And if you call it Worcestershire sauce, cool, we're in the same boat. Like the smiley face of Worcester, Massachusetts, a century later, the Worcestershire sauce of Worcester, England, also took off. And in 1876, a high court in England ruled that the Lee and Perrins couldn't have a monopoly on the name Worcestershire sauce. So that is why we don't have different names for it when other companies produce it. And these kind of sauces made from fermented fish go back to antiquity in the Mediterranean and also in eastern parts of Asia, and they are old names. And we'll get to East Asia in a little bit, but while we're talking about Asia, we should mention that the tamarind used for the original Lee and Perrins probably came from South Asia, specifically India. And so I think that's why there was this idea that this sauce was somehow a recipe from India. There was a kind of rumored story that this is where the recipe came from, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence for that that have has been found. But for sure, I would probably bet on the fact that the tamarind for sure came from India. The tamarinds aren't originally from India. Some scientists did a study not too long ago, to a genetic study to figure out where the tamarind originally came from. And the way they do that is they focus on the place where there's the most genetic diversity is usually the kind of center of where things started. It's usually that has the most genetic diversity. The same thing is true with linguistics and anthropological studies and so forth. But nonetheless, they have a sense that Africa is tropical Africa specifically is the source of the tamarind originally. That's where the tamarind originally comes from. Maybe now what is Cameroon? It was that kind of area is maybe where the original they couldn't prove that for certain. They could definitely prove that it's African in origin, but Cameroon, they kind of hinted at that in their article. So I just put that out there, give you a kind of sense of where in the world the tamarind comes from. But the British in the 19th century, they're getting their tamarinds from India, no doubt, and that is probably why that story of this being a kind of specific Indian sauce came out. However, there are sauces that are a little further east that are going to be important to this, and certainly were known well before this, and made with anchovies. And that also involves a company that now owns Lee and Perrins. And that company that owns Lee and Perrins, you see, Lee and Perrins passed in the 20th century hands from a tobacco company, a big British tobacco company, to Danone, the famous now French yogurt company. I say now, but it was really the 1920s when it got moved to France. You see, a guy who was born in Thessaloniki, which is in what is now Greece. He was born when it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And he was part of the Jewish community in Thessaloniki, which was extremely, extremely large, and made up of Jewish people who were originally, centuries before, from the Iberian Peninsula. So their heart language is Ladino, which is basically a 15th century Spanish that evolved in that area and was written in a Hebrew script. So that's really cool. So a member of this very large community started a yogurt business in Barcelona, in Catalonia, in Spain, and that business he named after his son Daniel, or as he was affectionately known, Little Daniel, which is where the company name still comes from. So that, and in the U.S., we have a yogurt that's branded Dannon. That's from this company. So I found that kind of interesting because the yogurt that was brought by Itzhak Carasso from the Thessaloniki to Barcelona, then to Paris, where the company finally ended up, is used to make a very famous sauce in the Eastern Mediterranean, which in Greek is called tzatziki, and is a yogurt sauce. So the sauce, the thread of sauce making continues through the corporate history of Lee and Perrins. Because guess what? Danone sold the Lee and Perrins company to Heinz, and Kraft and Heinz merged. So Kraft Heinz is now the owner of Lee and Perrins, and Heinz started out in Western Pennsylvania in the United States and around the area of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And that company that Henry J. Heinz founded at first was making horseradish and horseradish sauce, and it just wasn't working so well. But Henry J. Heinz emerged from bankruptcy in the 1870s and founded a company with his brother and a cousin. And that company's first big hit product, and almost immediately it was what they were really focusing on as a important product, was a sauce. And that sauce, the name of that sauce ultimately comes from Southeast Asia and the southern parts of East Asia, and that sauce is called in English ketchup. And I won't get into how to spell ketchup because people spell it different ways. Nonetheless, in the 1700s in the U.S., a sauce that borrowed its name from a fish sauce in Southeast Asia, and which was ketchup. And you still see the evolution of this name today in, for example, the Indonesian language, and ketchup manis, which is a sweet soy sauce, and the word for that's the word ketchup. It comes from this same word that had to do probably originally with a fish sauce in that very area, because the first records we have of it being used in English refer to ketchup as an East Indian sauce. So I suspect that even though the word may come from one of the Chinese languages, the ketchup, that's a possibility about the etymology of it. It seems like there was contact in what was then called the East Indies that resulted in this name of this sauce being brought to the English-speaking world. And in the United States, it started getting made with this wonderful fruit, although some people don't like to think of it as a fruit, but it is, probably from what is now Mexico originally. It was probably where it was originally first grown as a crop, and that's the tomato. And that New World tradition of a tomato ketchup really caught on in the U.S., and then Heinz's version of it became, in the same way Lea & Perrins sauce became a standard sauce in England and then the world, so did Heinz's ketchup. You see, earlier recipes included mushrooms in that. It was a mushroom ketchup instead of tomatoes. But in the U.S., tomatoes were used. And also anchovies. All these original recipes had anchovies. That's why this link to that East Asian fish sauce idea of ketchup, that's where it continues through to the tomato ketchup. So, in honor of all of our sauces today, and of course in honor of Worcester in England, let's draw a card and see what the cards have to tell us today. Yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles. Cards tell us some things. And what's in the sauce for today, cards? Here we go. No, it's passions are for hobbies. Okay, that's it. That's our favorite card. I know cards. It's really our favorite. So, well, one of my passions is cooking. So that's a great hobby that I have. Well, how about you? So I hope you have a great day. And if you're in Worcester in the UK, hiya, and we'll see you next time on Life's Potluck Buffet.